All right, happy Wednesday, freshmen. Today we are just going to talk about two more forms of poetry. We're going to be talking about sonnets and we're going to talk about haikus. And these are both poetry forms that are very straightforward. They have really exact rules. They have very precise expectations that make it really clear to tell what kind of poems are sonnets and what kind of poems are haikus because of their rhythm patterns and their rhyme scheme patterns. So they have very, very specific expectations. So a sonnet is a 14-line poem, and it's one stanza. So it's not broken up into multiple stanzas. It's just one long 14-line stanza that follows iambic pentameter. So that's when you have it following that da-da, 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 and there's 10 syllables per line in iambic pentameter, and there's a downbeat on every other syllable. So 14 lines, 10 syllables each lines, one stanza, iambic pentameter, and then it follows a very specific rhyme scheme, which is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So I'm going to read you Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. This is one of his most famous sonnets, and it's actually from Romeo and Juliet. So this is Romeo talking to Juliet, and this is a sonnet, and I will kind of explain how it's a sonnet as we go. Shall I compare these to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So day and May rhyme, and then temperate and date are intended to rhyme. The way that we say those words in English with our specific American accents doesn't sound quite as rhymey, but it would rhyme in Shakespeare's time if you were to say temperate and date, or temperate and dut. So, you know, how you want to say the words. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So shines and declines rhymes, and dimmed and untrimmed rhymes. So that's your C, D, C, D. And then, by thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in the shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So again, you see the same rhyme scheme. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this life gives to thee. So the last two rhymes are in just the last two lines. They rhyme with each other. So you don't have alternating rhyme scheme, you have them rhyme with each other. So the first four lines you have alternating rhyme scheme, and then the second four lines you have alternating rhyme scheme with different sounds, and then the third set of four lines you have alternating rhyme scheme with a different set of sounds, and then the final two lines, lines 13 and 14, just rhyme with each other. So again, 14 lines, iambic pentameter, 10 syllables each line, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G rhyme scheme. So it follows that pretty exactly, and that is what makes it a sonnet, basically. So you can easily determine sonnets if you just count it out. Is it 14 lines? Does each line have 10 syllables? Does the end of each line rhyme with every other line in groups of four? Stuff like that. So I just want to point out the iambic pentameter in it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So you kind of can see the rhythm and how it's 10 syllables. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Okay, so that's kind of how iambic pentameter is present in poetry. Shakespeare does that alternating rhythm and that rhyme scheme, which just makes it sound very poetic. This is a descriptive poem. He is describing her. It could also technically fall under lyric poetry because he is talking about his own emotions and his love for her, but it would most likely be considered a descriptive poem because he's describing her beauty, he's describing the way that she looks. So that's a sonnet, a Shakespearean sonnet, Romeo's speech in Act 2 to Juliet. So if you have any questions about that, let me know, but again, it's really easy to determine once you're able to find the rhyme scheme, once you're able to find the rhythm pattern, and making sure it has those 14 lines. Those are the big three indicators of a sonnet. And then a haiku is a very short Japanese style poem. Sorry, I'm just making sure my dog's not getting into anything. He's fine. A haiku is a Japanese style poem, but when it's written in English, it just has alternating 5-7-5 rhythm scheme. So the first line has 5 syllables, the second line has 7 syllables, the third line has 5 syllables. Almost always haikus are written to be descriptive poems. They are written as describing a nature scene. So haikus would very rarely fall under the other two categories because most haikus are written to describe nature, and so they're just very straightforward, very descriptive poems. They're not narrative, they're not lyrical. So I'm going to read you an example of a haiku from, this is the example that's in the slideshow. An old silent pond, a frog jumps into the pond, splash, silence again. So it's descriptive, it's describing a nature scene. As you can see, it doesn't really follow any kind of specific rhyme scheme. You have repetition of the word pond, but that's not considered rhyming if it's the same word. So there's no specific rhyme scheme, but there is that specific rhythm scheme because of an old silent pond, a frog jumps into the pond, 7, splash, silence again, 5. So 5, 7, 5, rhythm scheme, no clear rhyme scheme, but these are always very short. It's always really clear to tell if it's a haiku because it almost always describes something going on in nature. And yeah, that's basically all there is to a haiku. So that's kind of the form of those two kinds of poems, sonnets and haikus, what to look for their rhythm scheme, their rhyme scheme if they have any, how to count it out. A haiku, like a sonnet, is just one stanza, and it's just a 3-line stanza, whereas a sonnet is a 14-line stanza. So they're pretty easily distinguishable, those two especially if you're counting lines, counting syllables, and looking for rhythm and rhyme patterns. So that's a haiku and a sonnet for you. If you have any questions about either of those two forms, you can email me or comment, and I will get back to you right away. Otherwise, that is it for today, and tomorrow we will talk about our final form, which is the villanelle. And then I'm going to go over a little bit for what your final assignment is going to be for this poetry unit in order to wrap it up. So yeah, otherwise, I hope you guys have a good Wednesday.